Welcome to another episode of The Catholic Novel. I'm Father Robert Lauder. Today's lecture will be on Edwin O'Connor's The Edge of Sadness. I am so excited about this novel that I'm going to do 2 shows on it. This is the first, and when I do the second show, I will announce that that is the second. Let me give you a little bit of my history with Edwin O'Connor. Many years ago in the 1950s, I read his novel, The Last Hurrah. And I read it when I was in the major seminary in Huntington. Now, we had a very strict rule there that there was no talking above the first floor. So the corridors upstairs were extremely quiet. As I was reading O'Connor's The Last Hurrah, I was laughing out loud. I mean, I was almost hysterical. And even back then, I thought, if anybody walks by my room, they're going to think Bob Lauder had a breakdown. I mean, it's a very funny novel. The Edge of Sadness, I read 60 years ago when it came out. To add another anecdote about my life with Edwin O'Connor, when I was a young priest, just around January, February of '61, my pastor gave me a month off, and I decided to investigate Catholic action in the Midwest. That was the center of the young Christian students, young Christian workers, Christian family movement, and it also, in South Bend, Indiana, was Ave Maria Press, which put out a number of Catholic books. So I went to this little tour, and when I was leaving South Bend, now I can't remember, but I think I may have had The Edge of Sadness in my hand to read on the plane. I get on the plane, and who's sitting next to me but Father Ted Hesburgh, the president of Notre Dame. Now, I don't remember everything we spoke about. I'm pretty sure we did not talk about the football team, but I know I asked him about Edwin O'Connor. Of course, he knew Edwin O'Connor personally. So I am really excited about this novel. Reading it, I tried to figure out what makes things funny. What is at the source of humor? What is it that makes us laugh? Now, I write a weekly column, but I never try to be humorous. My column, I call it Faith and Thought, so it tends to be heavy. It tends to be about theology or philosophy. So reading O'Connor, Last Hurrah, and The Edge of Sadness, I tried to figure out how does he do this? How does he insert humor and yet, at other parts in the novel, be extremely profound? So I went back to a book I liked very much, Peter Berger's Rumor of Angels. Peter Berger was a sociologist of religion, and in the particular section I looked at, he was talking about humor. And in his book, let me say this, at St. John's University, when I'm teaching philosophy, I explain to students that a real proof, is an argument which, once you understand it, you have to accept it, if it's a proof, okay? So someone may tell you it's a proof, and then you listen, you say, well, no, you haven't proven anything. But if it is a proof, you have no choice. Once you see it, you must accept it. Let me give a simple example. 2 and 2 are 4, okay? If you disagree with that, I may have to get you a room in some mental institution, okay? So here's what Berger does in that book. He does not offer proofs for God. He offers what he calls signals of transcendence, hints of transcendence. He says there are certain human experiences that call us beyond this world, that give us a hint of something more than this world. One of them he does is order. And I think that one is pretty easy to understand. He says, we all have a penchant for order. If you visited my room, you'd say, you know, this is total chaos. But it really isn't. I pretty much know where everything is. And if I get confused, it ruins the whole day. I mean, without order, I can't function. And I think that's true of most of us. But the argument, the signal of transcendence, the hint of transcendence that I'm interested in is humor. Peter Berger suggests that the very fact that we can laugh at something that is funny suggests to us this world is not all there is. This is not our final home. This is sort of a very narrow experience of life, and it's pointing toward a bigger and richer experience of life, and humor does that. Let me give a very simple example. Charlie Chaplin is walking along the street. He slips on a banana peel. We all laugh. If this world is all there is, we should start crying. See, if this world is all there is, if there's no meaning to it, if it's absurd, there's no world beyond this, then somebody slipping on a banana peel is just another tragedy. When Berger uses order, here's the argument he gives. The little boy, 4 years old, is crying in the middle of the night. 3 o'clock in the morning, he's crying. His mother comes in, she turns on all the lights. You know, she says there are no ghosts here, don't be afraid, there are no monsters. Everything is going to be okay. Now, if this world is all there is, everything is not going to be okay. That mother is going to die, the father will die, the child will die. She's really lying to him if she says everything's going to be okay. The very fact that she can say that means there's something more than this world. And something similar happens with humor. You see a discrepancy. Something doesn't fit, and it's funny, okay? So let me just read one paragraph from Peter Berger on humor. Now, I accept this argument completely. As I say, it's not a proof. It's just a hint of transcendence. He says, humor not only recognizes the comic discrepancy in the human condition, it also relativizes it, and thereby suggests that the tragic perspective on the discrepancies of the human condition can also be relativized. At least for the duration of the comic perception, the tragedy of man is bracketed. By laughing at the imprisonment of the human spirit, humor implies that this imprisonment is not final, but will be overcome. And by this implication provides yet another signal of transcendence, in this instance in the form of an intimation of redemption. Now, I think that is true. And here's this is something of the genius of Edwin O'Connor, and that's what I want to focus on, his use of humor in The Edge of Sadness. There's a character in it called Charles Comedy, and he's discrepancy incarnate. Here's what I mean. He presents himself as one way, and he is the exact opposite. And that happens all through the novel until one very dramatic scene. So let me tell you how we're introduced to him. We're introduced to him. He calls up the main character, Father Hugh Kennedy, very early in the morning. And he says to him, "Oh, Father, I hope I didn't get you up." And Father Kennedy says, No, I've been up for about an hour and a half. And Father Kennedy says he can almost detect the disappointment in Charlie Comedy's voice. He was hoping he would wake him up. And then he says, "Oh, Father, isn't it great to be up early in the morning? In my backyard, there are birds singing and chirping. It's just a wonderful thing, the birds." And Father Kennedy says to him, "Well, what do you do, Mr. Comedy? Do you go out and feed them some birdseed?" He says, "No, I throw rocks at them." You know how expensive it is to get a lawn, and that birdseed is expensive. Now, that's a typical Charlie Comedy presentation. First telling you what a great guy is, and then revealing that he is the exact opposite. And that goes all through the novel to this very dramatic scene, okay? Now, while I wasn't laughing out loud with Edge of Sadness, I just found it amazing that a writer could sprinkle his book with these humorous insights and yet also have these terrific insights into our relationship with God. I lectured on this book about 3 nights ago in an adult education course. And I wasn't sure the people in the class were as enthusiastic as I was, but when we began to talk about it, they began to loosen up a bit. And the next day, I checked with 2 people, and they also agreed that this is a great novel, okay? However, another person did say, I found Charlie Comedy sad. I didn't laugh at him at all because he was so self-deceived. I understand that, but the way O'Connor presents him, it is funny. And what happens, and this is not ruining the novel for you. What happens in the novel, late in the novel, Charlie Comedy sees himself as he really is. And he tells Father Kennedy, I don't have a friend in the world. The closest friend I ever had was your father. People don't like me. Even my own children don't like me. It's rather touching, okay? And the very fact that he doesn't use the word discrepancy, but he sees that he's a faker. He sees that he's a fraud. And in that scene, it's not supposed to be funny. In that scene, he's got a real insight, and we suspect, at least in the novel, that it's a kind of a moment of grace. Now, I said that what amazes me is that Edwin O'Connor can link these two, humor and then something profound. So he talks at one point in the novel about his father's death, and I think this is pretty good. He's raising the question of why do good people suffer. He says, "And so my father died. All through his illness, I had said my Mass for him each morning. Every day and every night I had prayed that he might be allowed either the miracle of recovery or the blessing of a happy death. These prayers were not answered. My father did not recover, and he died witless and in pain. And why this should have been, I have no idea at all. He was a very good man who had lived a very good life, yet he died a very cruel death. This is the hardest sort of thing to accept. For some, it's impossible, because here is this old, baffling problem that has always been with us and will be until the end of time, the problem of reconciling pain and suffering with an omnipotent and merciful God. There are all sorts of answers suggested to the problem, most of which are as old as the problem itself. Some are foolish, some are taken as reasonable, at least as reasonable as the mind of man could come up. But here it comes to me, we deal with something reason cannot reach, and with that part of man that reason does not touch. For when someone stands fixed and helpless before another's suffering, especially in those cases when those who suffer are plainly innocent of any guilt, then the cool light of reason may not be of much help. The syllogism does not support a mother who has seen her baby buried. And here I think faith comes in. I myself believe that there is no such thing as purposeless pain or suffering, although I must confess that for much of it I can see no purpose at all. But the point is that if one accepts God, one accepts him totally, accepts what he does not and what he does permit. One accepts it, but one does not necessarily understand it. Surely it's a question of vision. For as we are, we can see, but only to the corner. We cannot begin to see the whole design. I think that is a piece of really profound writing. So the many reasons I like this book, many reasons I'm giving 2 lectures on it, but one of them is that the same author can be extremely humorous and extremely deep. I recommend all the books I talk about here. I'm very confident that if you give it it's a long novel. My copy is 600 pages, but it reads very fast. I'd be awfully surprised if you didn't find it a terrific novel.